It can be so easy to get lost in the why can't I, and have the dreams that we dream seem like we have to go somewhere else to experience them. But the talk today is for those of us who are ready to consider how to have those dreams here now. I'm always interested in who shows up when I start a theme. And our theme this month is being awake to power. I was thinking of it, again, being Father's Day this month. And so one of the ideas of the masculine is power. And in being awake to power, how can we do that? And I thought, well, let's do it through the lens of being spiritual warriors. And now, I know years ago in Seattle, we would talk about being spiritual warriors, and I was running the small groups ministry then, and so many people were like, well, I just don't like the word of being a warrior. I just don't want to be a spiritual warrior. And, you know, I get that. Thank God there are a bunch of us that say, no, you know, I don't want anything that has war in it. I don't want war. And then we can also, necessarily but a lot of times we females shirk away from anything that says power. Or just if we're sort of new agey or new thoughty, we say, well, power, I don't want power. That's a bad thing. So part of this month, if you have any of that in you, part of this month is going to be reclaiming and re-understanding and reframing what those things mean. Because without power, if we cannot embrace power, then what are we? We're victims. And then as we see the world unfolding in ways we don't like, then we get resentful. And so that victimness and that resentment is then what we pass on to the world. And because we know the power of our thinking doesn't ever just stop with us. The power of our thought moves upon and into something that Jung called the collective unconscious. And as those ideas of, no, I don't have power, I don't want power, and then could be like, and I don't get to have power, and power is wrong, as that moves into that sea and field of collective unconscious, then what we help create is a world of powerlessness. And I don't think that serves anything. I don't think that serves anything. Now, granted, there are people who came into this teaching in the 70s and 80s, or like I did, came into the human potential movement, and we got filled up on the idea of personal power. You know, if it's to be, it's up to me, which is part of our teaching. But then what happens is if we make it all about me and my personal power and what I can move into, then that starts isolating me from the world. So we're not talking about that kind of power either. We're talking about the divine power that comes from within, that is generated by the divine. That kind of power about whom the teacher Jesus spoke of when he said, it is not I, but the Mother, Father, God within that doeth the work. I of myself can do nothing. It is that divine within me that does all. So as we consider power this month, I'm going to invite you to always see that power, that the locus, the source of that power, is not our human selves and competencies, as competent and bright as many of us are, but that infinite within us. That is the power that we are to harness in the world, that we are to express and be. And the metaphor for that is as a spiritual warrior. Now, as a spiritual warrior, first thing to know is that we are not warring against. In fact, we're not warring. But we are being a warrior for. As Ernest Holmes, the founder of our Science of Mind teaching, said, give me a people that are against nothing, but for something. Because what we point ourselves toward and for is what grows. Whatever we pit ourselves against also grows. What we resist persists. We remember that. So we stand as spiritual warriors for the world we want to see. And all this month, we'll be looking at different aspects of the spiritual warrior and how to be one. And since you guys are here today, that means you signed up to be a spiritual warrior. You didn't know it, but there you have it. The infinite within you knew. So now, first, I guess we better define what a spiritual warrior is, because I said a little bit about what it wasn't. And there's lots of ways to define it, but there's three key things that show up for me. And that is first, that a spiritual warrior is a stand for truth, for compassion, and for peace. Now, to many of you, being a stand is kind of a different way of that phrase. Usually we talk about taking a stand. And recently it's come into languaging being a stand. And I love that because it's kind of the idea that where I stand, something grows out instead of taking or grabbing. And being a stand connects it more powerfully to who I am than just taking one. So being a stand for truth in the world, for the deepest truth we know, being a stand for that, living my life out of that, being a stand for compassion, for more love in the world, for more understanding. And out of that, of course, is being a stand for peace. Being a stand for peace in what I think and what I say and what I do. Now, since I'm enlisting you all, enrolling you all in being spiritual warriors, if you have something else that you, as your spiritual warriorship, want to be a stand for, you get to have it. So you might think for a minute, is there something else that you're compelled to be a stand for? Just let that rumble through you. Now, a second thing that occurs to me about being a spiritual warrior is being committed to using all of our life, all parts of our life, all aspects, all events of our life as vehicles for waking up. We've talked a little bit about this before, but that's what the spiritual warrior does. Not just the good parts of our life. Oh, I love this, I love my life. But everything that shows up, to say this, whether I like it, whether I don't like it, whether it's joyful, whether it's sad, or whether it's just boring and dull. That I can use all of that as a vehicle to wake up. Whether it's because I wake up and be more present to what is showing up, whether I wake up by seeing something that's showing up in my life as a call to be more compassionate, or a call to be more creative, or a call to be more wise, but that I see anything that shows up in my life as that possibility to wake up more fully. And that's a tricky thing to do. We'll talk about what helps us with that. But that means that if I have a reversal, if I lose my job, I know that's a call to be something more. I know that's a call to know spirit. If I find myself in a loving relationship, I know that's a call to know the beloved as my partner. when we have children. We all know children have their joys, have their annoyances, and then have that place when the children are small that can just feel dull. The getting them up and getting up in the middle of the night. All of that is a vehicle to be more present, to love, to life itself. So I call that a major part of the spiritual warrior, as seeing that that's what life is, a call to wake up. But we have to use it that way. And the third thing about being a spiritual warrior is that I am committed to shifting my consciousness before I ask the world or other people to change. That if I see something in the world that I don't like, if somebody is behaving in a way that I just don't agree with, my charge as a spiritual warrior is to go within first and ask, who do I need to become? And you know, the thing about being a warrior is you don't run from stuff. And I think we'll be talking about this later, is when things get uncomfortable, or somebody's pointing a finger at us, or life seems to be pointing a finger at us, telling us we've screwed up or we're wrong. As a spiritual warrior, we hang in there. We don't run from discomfort. And we don't even try to pray it away, which sometimes I feel compelled to do, is to be present, awake to all of it, all of life. Or as John Kabat-Zinn, the great meditation teacher at a hospital major program in the East Coast, he says, the whole enchilada, oh no, that was somebody else. No, the full catastrophe. He quotes Zorba the Greek. The full catastrophe of life. So we are committed to looking within, knowing all those fingers pointing at us, if we try to point the finger, is to look within. Not to do beat up, not to make ourselves wrong, but to look within and see what's being called for. So what do you think it would feel like to live this way? Looking out in this room, and the many of you I know that you have already lived as a spiritual warrior, perhaps in some parts of your lives, perhaps in all your life. So begin opening to what more and where in your life more do you need to take in this idea of being a spiritual warrior? And what that could be like for you. What your life could look like. Because it's not easy, what I'm asking of us, or inviting us into, is not easy, and it isn't often the way the world seems to work. The world would argue for us changing everything else. The world would often argue for us staying small and not speaking up, speaking our truth. The world would argue that we need to fix ourselves in many ways before we could dare to say, I'm a spiritual warrior of truth. So we have three things that I think are key to supporting ourselves in our spiritual warriorhood. The first one is obvious, but I feel that we need to repeat it over and over again. We need to equip ourselves daily, nurture and nourish ourselves. You could even say arm ourselves, giving the metaphor, spiritual warrior, with spirit. Daily spiritual practice, daily spiritual practice, daily spiritual practice. Otherwise, this whole thing called spiritual warrior will just come up in being an aggressive, my way or the highway. So as I said, because that source of our true power is always spirit, we need to take our time in the morning to fill up, to turn to spirit, to say, what is mine to be? What is mine to do? What is the truth of me? Which is that infinite spirit. And I don't care how long you've been in this teaching. We need to do it every day or we miss it. You can ask Connie. She doesn't decide, oh, I only need to do it once a quarter now because I've been a practitioner for 30 years. Or Hollis. Oh, I just need to do it once a year now because I'm... No. Spiritual warriors know that it is part of our daily practice. Second, and this is a daily moment-to-moment practice too, is to check the congruency of our conversation. And by that I mean both our inner and outer conversation. Is it congruent with being a spiritual warrior? Is it congruent with divine truth? Is it congruent with the stand we're being in the world for truth, compassion, and peace? If our outer conversations are gossiping and complaining and making wrong, then we know what happens. We start shrinking our viewpoint, and all we see is what's wrong, what's not working. And that defeats us and depletes us. And or gives us stuff we think we need to fight against. And we also know that that sends out those messages into the collective unconscious. It sends messages out to the law. It says, oh, that's what you see. That must be what you want more of. Let me deliver more back to you. However, if we have conversations that are encouraging, that are compassionate, that we seek with our words to lift others, then not only are we being congruent with our stand, but we find that we are lifted in return. That as we focus on encouragement and compassion and love, we become more of that, and we see more of that, and we feel more of that, and we're expanded. Experiment right now. Think about a conversation where you were complaining with someone. You know, and we kind of get into that and have fun sometimes. Did you go away from that conversation feeling empowered? Like you were adding to the world? Probably not. Now think of a conversation you had where perhaps you got excited about a new idea. Or perhaps a friend shared with you a dream they had, they were starting to work with. I mean, a dream to create something in the world. And you found a way to encourage them or had some ways to network. How do you feel when you come out of that conversation? You feel expanded. And we know when our words go to serve and uplift, we are uplifted in return. So by supporting, we support. And then, of course, the other thing that supports us in spiritual warriorhood is the company we keep, our comrades in arms. I was reading Michael Bernard Beckwith's book, Spiritual Liberation, and he says, when you choose a friend, you are biting off a chunk of your destiny. When you choose a friend, you are biting off a chunk of your destiny. Why did he say that? He said that because who we choose to have close in around us either lifts us in our greater yet to be or diminishes us to a lowest common denominator. Somebody else, one of these, I think, motivational speakers said, we are the average of the people we hang out with. So it's kind of like you could say we all tend to flow to the lowest common denominator. So we can think of the company we keep. Are we around people who stomp on dreams? Or are we around partners in possibility? Do we still keep some friends from childhood because, we have memories and nostalgia, but somehow all we talk about is what's not working and, oh, my husband is a jerk or this or that? Or do we surround ourselves, in the human potential world, we could say, do we surround ourselves with winners? Well, that's a useful thing, but do we surround ourselves with people who speak possibility? People who have their own dreams, people who have their own stands, their being in the world for things that you support. And do you talk about those dreams and those possibilities? Do you create a climate of joy with your comrades in arms? Without that kind of support, as long as we're on the planet and it looks like there's more than one of us, we need those ways to support ourselves. So the spiritual warrior has comrades in arms that support them in being that place of spirit. There are some days when some of us get up and go, this is way too much work. Being a spiritual warrior, are you kidding me? Why do we need to do this? And especially, I still don't like that warrior term. Well, for one, it's time. Those of us who are drawn to this message, you all were spiritual beings before you set foot in this center. Many of you I know had read a lot, had done a lot of things, had in some vague way known that you were bigger than your human self and wanted to create for yourself a life of joy, abundance, and meaning. So it's time. If you haven't already identified yourself as a spiritual being having a purpose in the way you walk in the world, it is time to claim that. The world could use it if you haven't noticed. The world doesn't need us telling it what to do. The people in our lives don't need us to tell them what to do. I hate that part. But what the world does need of us is being that kind of stand. I'm talking about being a stand of truth, which sometimes means being quiet and sometimes means speaking up. But the world needs that, people who are authentically connected to their divine self and living from that place, no matter what. And it's critical, I think, for us to be a spiritual warrior because the truth of the way it works is that what we think, what we say, and our actions all go to create either more peace or more aggression in the world, more compassion or more hate. As I said, there is that race consciousness. That's Ernest Holmes' word. Jung's word was the collective unconscious. There is that race consciousness that is the sea of all thoughts that have ever been thunk. And we add to the beauty of it or subtract from the beauty of it every moment. And so as spiritual warriors, we realize that it is important for us to be adding to the good, adding to the compassion, adding to the joy. It's like, for lack of a better term, it's like a huge bank account. And if we are subtracting from the good, we are necessarily, if we debit from the good, we are necessarily crediting to what doesn't work in the world. And this sea of race consciousness isn't just sort of a field that exists. What it is something that is pervasive. We know there's stuff in race consciousness that pulls us to things that are not the life we want to see. Life is struggle. War is inevitable. People who don't think like me are stupid. Those are all thoughts that exist in race consciousness. There's an us and a them. And the us is against us. Whoever's not for us must be against us. All those ideas exist in race consciousness and will continue to have power in the world until those thoughts are overpowered by thoughts of love, by thoughts of oneness, by thoughts of knowing God is really all there is. And so, as spiritual warriors, we recognize the import of not just what we do, but what we be all the time. So it's really, everyone has a choice. A lot of people aren't awake to the choice. That's the kicker. We are. We are awake to the power of the choices we have to add to this world that we want to see. So, you get to choose. As I said, I don't think it's easy to be a spiritual warrior. I go for days forgetting. That's what I'm here to do and be. But look and see if it feels right to your soul, to the deepest part of you, to be a spiritual warrior. And heck, you can give it another name. Don't tell me, but you can give it another name if you want to, something that inspires you. But to the degree that a spiritual warrior is not just passive and is powerful, then I invite us to take it on. To take it on and be the world we want to see. Let's go into prayer. I am so grateful that there is a power and presence in the universe that is greater than me. I am so grateful that the great power in the universe is not me. And yet, that power and presence I can use. I can step into, I can claim for myself. That power of the divine that is all love, all creativity, all intelligence and vast wisdom, vaster than I can know. All of that infinite stands ready to be downloaded, to be poured, to be given into my being so that I can use it, so that I can be it, so that I can generate it. And there is nothing opposing it except some human fear that might make me turn away or disclaim it. So in this moment, I stop disclaiming the power of who I am as an expression of the divine. And for everyone who wants to join me in this prayer, let my I be your I. as I step into claiming spiritual warriorhood, as I step into claiming that I am the place where spirit shows up as truth, as compassion, as peace, and as any other idea that burns brightly in you, and that infused with divine guidance, I think in a way that adds to the peace and love in the world. I speak in a way that adds to compassion in the world. I act in a way that establishes oneness. And I know as I continue to daily open to Spirit that I am guided to do this in ever more powerful, not larger, but ever more powerful ways that uplift those around me, that uplift the world. And I give thanks again that it is not I of myself. It is that divine power that can never be exhausted. And I allow it to move through me. I allow it to inspire me. I allow it to live me. And I am grateful that as I do this, I know that I am fulfilling my purpose. My soul sings. And I become that in whom the divine is well pleased. And so releasing this word of claiming, releasing this declaration into the law which only says yes, I know it is done. Again, I give thanks. So it is.
Rising up, back on the street, taking time, taking action. No resistance, now we're feeling complete. We are souls made to love and survive. So many times things happen too fast. We trade our peace for our passion.